Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is SynthWorld. I am your host, DJ Nomad on WSLR LP 96.5 FM Sarasota and WBPV LP 100.1 FM Bradenton. And I am thrilled to have electronic producer, kind of on the dark side of the tracks, if you will, all around just awesome producer though, Michael, aka Slumber. Slumber, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, man, it's good to meet you. Thanks for reaching out and having me on.
Absolutely. Super excited. I heard a little bit of your music here and there, but it wasn't really until your most recent release last year, I should say, your second to most recent release, Fly By Night, that I really came to know who you are and your whole catalog. So it was an absolute blast to dive through all of that, and excited to have you on. I want to get you on a map real quick, though. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you are
Hmm.
in Central California. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm from a town called Reedley. It's a tiny little, I think there's 25,000 people, agricultural town, kind of right at the mouth of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So there's a river through
Oh,
town, and our town is named after some guy that had a ferry in the 1800s. He like ran a ferry across the river, and we named our whole town after him because I guess he was an important fella.
everybody loved that guy. Yeah. When I looked up your information on your Bandcamp, for example, it says Visalia. Looked up the town. It looks like this really
Hmm.
beautiful, quaint, kind of just picturesque American town. It really looks awesome. So I'm just wondering, like, how does one develop such a dark, kind of intense sound growing up in a place like that?
I don't know. Maybe I've always been that way, but just the music I grew up on, I suppose, and the movies I watched and things like that really kind of informed my darker side. I'm not like a brooding guy. Like I'm a pretty boring, happy-go-lucky guy most of the time. And then yeah, when I make music for some reason, it sort of just comes out that way.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like I've always naturally kind of leaned into the more dark side of music as well, as much as I do love poppy, happy music. Um, yeah, so I feel you there. I
Hmm.
want to dive into some of those, influences and some of the like things that really shape that. But I want to kind of take us all the way back to why you do music, that like that's such a big part of how I view things, as those genesis moments. So, do you remember at all that kind of
Mm.
first deep moment with music? And then also, do you by chance remember how you stumbled upon the whole kind of like synthwave scene?
Yeah, well, I'll try to condense it as much as I can because we're starting when I'm 12, 13 years old. But I had an older sister who was a music fanatic, and all of her friends would come over and they would listen to music. And her bedroom was right next to my bedroom, so I would just sit there and just think, wow, all these like my sister and her cute friends are like so into this, like how cool, like how cool for them. And so just hearing it through the walls growing up, I just became obsessed. I think by the time I was in like sixth grade or so, that was right around when kind of the grunge era, like right when Kurt Cobain, was like the biggest guy in the world.
Mhm.
Um, so it was around that time, and I just for whatever reason, it was just something that I felt like I kind of immediately understood. Just music. I mean, it was magical. I had no idea how they were doing anything, but all of a sudden, I went from not nothing to like, music like 24/7. Mostly because of my big sister and her cute friends. They're like 2 years older than me, but I mean, at that age, I was like this dumb little kid with my action figures, and there was these cool, grungy, you know, girls in my house, and it was like hard to ignore.
Yeah, I kind of, I think I might be a little bit younger than you, but that does kind of remind me of hearing my sister, bedroom over with her friends, listening to like the Spice Girls and practicing those songs for their talent shows. So that's really great. So let
For
me
sure.
set aside synthwave for just a second. I want to might as well ask you, since we're on the topic of like, most influential artists on your sound. and why? Can think of like top three for me?
First band I ever loved was probably Weezer. Just that was one of those things I heard through the wall, and
Nice.
my sister had been loaned a tape by some dangerous guy, and I heard that I could only listen to it one time, and I got to give it right back because this guy will like beat up my sister if he doesn't get his tape. So sorry, Weezer was like this. Oh my gosh, this like sacred little thing in my hands that I put in my boombox that I'd saved all summer for. So like I think Weezer was my first favorite band that after hearing a lot of different stuff was one that was like, oh, I get it, because I'm a dork. I was a dork then, I'm a dork now, and just something about that nerd rock thing was like, yep, there's my guys. Like those are my people. And then I also lived in the Bay Area for a little while, and that's where the Deftones are from. And so I got into the Deftones pretty heavily in like junior high, high school. And then as I grew up a little bit and became emotionally aware, I got really into Death Cab for Cutie. Just became one of my favorite songwriting projects of all time. There's just the Plans album specifically is just like this perfect 10 out of 10. I maybe have, 3 10 out of 10 records that I can, for me, and Plans is like number one by a mile.
Yeah, okay, so three great options there. Yeah, how'd you get into synthwave and how have you formulated that
Mm.
kind of sound palette?
Well, I mean, I was born in the 80s. Little, slumber lore. I was born June 25th, 1982, which is the same day Blade Runner and The Thing was released in theaters. I just love telling people that. So like me and Blade Runner and The Thing, we're all, three peas in a pod or whatever.
Special
But
day.
as far as synthwave goes, I think I'm kind of a rare exception. I learned production basically through synthwave. I wasn't already producing music per se. I had a kind of a generic recording setup. I would just kind of jot down ideas. And then I started doing remixes for this website that would do these contests. And people really liked when I would do kind of 80s sounds. And it was all just cycling through different software. There was no rhyme or reason. I was kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And I found out it was kind of easy for me to make that specific kind of music. I don't know why. I mean, it might have been the movies I grew up on. I was a big John Carpenter fan, and my parents didn't really um, restrict me from watching most things. No nudity, but any type of robot violence and John Carpenter and RoboCop, all those things I loved growing up. And so I guess I just sort of had it instilled in me a little bit, but without really knowing it. And then when I started trying to make my own sounds, it was really organic. Not organic. It kind of just naturally was just already there. So it was easy.
So you were making these mashups, you said, for a website. How did that kind of morph into you, like, getting into a DAW? I'm guessing you might have some analog instruments and then, what you are today.
Started with just a little interface like I'm using now to talk to you, just something I could plug a mic into, and recording my dad's acoustic guitar. That was a big part of my upbringing too. Is my dad, he didn't play, but he owned this nice old Japanese made acoustic guitar, and it was just always around the house, and I would always mess with it. And I was terrible at it. I couldn't tune it, I couldn't do anything. But slowly but surely, uh, I played in bands my whole 20s. It's just all different local kind of bar bands, if you want to call it that. We were kind of a punk thing, but I've always played guitar really since I was a teen. And we hit that age, I'm 42. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not, but I hit that age at the end of my 20s where everybody was having kids and taking their careers more seriously, and it just stopped.
Yeah.
And that
Perfect.
was okay, but it didn't stop for me. I have a real kind of a compulsion to just like write riffs all the time. They're just, constantly in my head and constantly in my heart. And so I just wanted to keep going. And so I started recording, and I kind of got kind of fascinated with that side of it because it's a whole nother world. It's like loving to fly in an airplane and then wanting to be a pilot. I was like, I got to figure this stuff out. So I just started accumulating more and more gear, and eventually I bought a drum machine that has software. So it's not a typical DAW. It's basically a drum machine that you can like multi-track record on. So it's very pared down compared to something like Ableton or Pro Tools. It doesn't do even a fraction of what that stuff does. But I've managed to make everything I've ever made just on this. It's a Native Instruments machine, is what it's called. It's just
Wow, that's
kind of a
incredible.
sampler drum machine, but you can do more with it if you really want to tear it apart. You can do quite a bit with it.
That's incredible, man. I mean, really impressive. Ah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I know what you're talking about, but like like to think about your sound design and to know that that is what you're using
Mm,
essentially to do it and without a lot of the other tools and stuff that you'll get through an Ableton or a Logic Pro or Cubase or whatever it's called, Cubit, whatever, Cubit, whatever. Anyway,
mhm.
that's amazing. Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Thank
and
you.
we'll touch on, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's impressive. I'm almost never cease to be amazed by what artists in this kind of like area of electronic music can do with so little.
Hmm.
Anyway, so and we'll touch on your equipment and whatnot a little bit later here. But do you remember like,
Okay.
the first synth wave or like retro wave style artist that you heard that you were like, oh, okay, I've gotta start, I gotta do this.
I saw Drive just like almost every other synthwave producer I've ever met. I saw Drive and I said, well, I'm going to do that. I just, it was like a light turned on and I was like, that's so simple. It was such a simple song that Kavinsky, whatever, can't remember what it's called now, but that Kavinsky song was the first thing I heard. And I just thought like, yeah, that speaks to me. And then the movie itself is pretty cool. And
Yeah.
so I went digging, and the next person I discovered was Comtrues. I don't know if you know
Oh,
the Comtrues. He's a pretty big deal to me.
dude, he's
And
the
so I've pretty
most.
much just been stealing from. That's part of why I like synthwave too. Is there's almost something punk rock about it. It feels very community driven. We all listen to each other's stuff. We all try to support each other. There's the occasional hater here and there and things like that, but for the most part, I mean, I haven't made any enemies, and that's pretty surprising. I think for the music business.
Feel like every artist probably has this that's been at it, certainly at least this long. Any like hidden gem, kind of secret production skills or tips or something like that that you've discovered that you feel like
Mm.
is really useful or beneficial, but maybe hard to come across?
One thing that I feel like is useful for me is that I don't use templates. I start from scratch every time. I rarely have an idea of what I want to accomplish, in a given studio session. I just come out here and I turn everything on until all the lights are flickering, and I just start making. I think I have a pretty good ear. I think that's like my number one skill is that I know what sounds good to me, and it doesn't take me very long to figure that out. So I'll just come out here and start noodling, and sometimes I'm a night owl. It's part of why the name is Slumber and all that stuff. And so I'll just work through the night. And most of the time, if I'm actually like kind of on, uh, if it's a good session, I'll do it. I'll do a track a night. It takes me about a night. I mean, that's not necessarily like a secret weapon of any kind, but that's I think my process is I what I do best is that I can work fast. I'm confident with the moves I make. I try not to get too lost in compression ratios or just mic, fine tuning. It's just I make my stuff, I get it done, and then I move on.
Yeah, for sure. Having that decisiveness of it and not getting bogged down in, like you just talked about, all the things you could get bogged down in, which would either delay the music or you overthink things so much you don't release,
Hmm.
or you make changes you
It's so tempting too,
do.
but
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure that is incredibly common. So, no surprise there. But, that brings up another good question because you kind of hinted at the origins of your moniker, and you're working all the way through the night on a song. Wondering what your work life is like or what your schedule is like. What do you so to zoom out from your music for a second, what do you do outside of music to kind of keep yourself afloat?
honestly, I bounce around a lot. I'm fortunate. My wife has a pretty good corporate job. I do a lot of not odd jobs. I just take jobs. I work most of the time throughout the year. I've worked in everything from chemistry labs as like a lab scientist to a full time like box stacker at a fruit processing plant. I'll just stack boxes for like 12 hours a day. I sort of only make the money that I need to make so that I can focus on this. And again, I'm so lucky. My wife understands it. She says that she is my love and this is my passion, and she kind of has come to terms with that because we've been together for 15 years. So
Mhm.
she sort of just is like, well, was me when when we met, and so I've done a million different jobs, and I'll probably do a million different more. Currently, I'm working with it's called IHSS. I don't know if you have that in Florida, but it's in-home supportive services. I have a severely disabled relative who's getting on in his years and needs 24-hour care. So I'm just like kind of a little helper for my uncle, and it's kind of a county program, I guess. So I kind of get paid through the county right now to do that, which is really cool because I would be doing it for free, much like the music. I'd be doing that kind of stuff for free if there was enough hours in the day. But it's really cool to just get a little bit of walking around money for helping out somebody who needs it.
Truly heartwarming thing to hear about your wife and your partner to love you and not let that stuff get in the way of the relationship or her love for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really beautiful. I want to talk about, throughout at least the back end of this first wave we're talking about, you're a part of it. And
Mm.
you are really, especially for how long you've been around, pretty extensive catalog. Um, and you definitely, even though you kind of seem to have a consistent kind of dark synth, if you will, uh, foundation of your music, you definitely still have kind of explored beyond that, if you will, right? You have some like kind of straightaway synthwave stuff. You have some like kind of like
Sure, yeah.
bassy style, vibey stuff. You have some chill synth. You have some stuff that almost like borders on synth pop, and is like very kind of like melancholy and like almost like lounge music. It's really cool. Anyway, and then you have the experimental stuff like your most recent release. So,
Hmm.
you definitely gone all over a little bit, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to if that's intentional and why maybe it's important to diversify your catalog in that way.
In a way, it's intentional. Like I said, I kind of come out here. I don't use like templates. A lot of people, they'll spend a long time setting up their software so that when they open it up, all their sounds are ready to go. I've never done that. It's mostly just I'm lazy. So I always start from scratch. So I think when you do stuff like that, I mean, it really is a crapshoot. I could come out here and make anything really. I mean, sometimes I'll, because I've had not success, but because I've been mostly kind of considered a synthwave guy. Sometimes I'll steer it in that direction intentionally, but I'm not kind of I don't really adhere to anything music wise. So I mean, even lately, I'm trying to do some like singer songwriter stuff. I've got a bunch of like black metal demos that'll never see the light of day. It's just what I feel like when I come out here. If I hear something cool on the radio or Spotify or really TikTok, even if I hear something that catches my ear, I'll just come out here and see if I can make something like it. A lot of times it really is just me borrowing from other artists, which I feel like I'm fairly original, but I've stolen directly from songs that I just can't get out of my head before. And not, I wouldn't say plagiarize because it's mostly what I make is instrumental. So I'm not stealing them note for note, but I'll take their BPM. I'll take the kind of the synth tones that they're using. I'll take what I can without full on making like a cover song.
Fly By Night, last year's release. I feel like that was emblematic of that at minimum because it
Mm,
just felt like so much more momentous and kind of again like upgraded,
mm,
mature step in the right direction. Especially we were talking about the artwork. Love that
hmm.
artwork. One of maybe one of my favorite album covers ever. I
Oh
mean,
wow, thank you.
dude, yeah, the butterfly and the beautiful. So I want to just focus on that album for just a sec because it is so fantastic. Can you
Yeah.
just speak about that album for a second and how um, maybe that has to some degree maybe changed the trajectory of what where Slvmber
Mm.
is going?
Let's see when it came out. I think August of last year.
Mhm.
I started sort of trying to find a label for it around February of 2024, I suppose. So that means for about 6 months of 20, the second half of 2023 is when I worked on that record, and I'd gotten fired from a job, and it was like probably one of the jobs I'd had the longest that I'd put the most work into, and I lost it, and I was pretty hurt about it. So it's always good to make art with hurt feelings, as no one has ever said before. But I really wanted to, and I'd given a lot to that job, and I hadn't had a lot of time to create during the course of that job, and so I was free, but not by my own. hand. I suddenly had all this time to create, and I had sort of like lost my touch. It took me a solid few months to even make something that I was like, hey, cool, I'm starting to get back in the habit again. Yeah, so with that record, I think I was kind of in a salty mood, and the place like I like to go to near the beach. I live a couple hours from the beach, but I go like super often because it's close enough. Has a huge monarch grove of monarch butterflies. They come there to I don't know if they mate or if they rest or what. Anyways, it's just this beautiful thing of butterflies, and that's how the album came about. It was like a butterfly because like I said, I'm not a tough guy. I'm kind of a delicate man or whatever. And the album's all over the place. I think it's the most. It's funny because I think it's the most kind of cohesive album I've made, but
Mhm.
it's also got the most variation. My number one label I always wanted to work with finally was like, you know what? I think we're gonna do it, kid. So New Retrowave was nice enough to put it out for me, and yeah, and then we just waited another year. The vinyl just got here last week or the week before that, so like the vinyls are there. I think it's CDs too if you want to get a CD.
Oop.
Anyways, so yeah, so it's just about me being a butterfly and breaking out of my glass case, or whatever the cover tells you.
Why do you think, if you had to put a pin on it, there is, and then there may be a lot of reasons, but why is there so much demand for this kind of intense, dark music? I mean, I'm not talking about just your music, but you know what I
Hmm.
mean? I feel like there's, and this is kind of, I think, reflected in cinema as well and movie,
Hmm.
television. There's this very strong demand for dark, kind of haunting, sinister, serious material in the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. You'd want to ask like a sociologist or something before me, but I mean, I think to some people, depending on who you ask, maybe these are dark times. Maybe there's kind of a goth scene around here, but maybe there's where I live. I mean, maybe there's some darkness inside ourselves, and it's easier to see it in that form of entertainment than to really not act on those ideations, but maybe it helps temper you to to sort of artistically give yourself over to the darker side of things. I mean, I grew up loving horror, and I don't feel like I'm some desensitized person. I'm not on the dark web watching, you know, terrible actual live events or anything like that. But I've always liked a good violent shoot 'em up or a crazy vampire movie. And I think it's just a safe way to maybe explore that side of yourself.
I like that. That's a really nice way to put it. A safe way to explore that side of yourself. Yeah, very nice. Your most recent release,
Mm,
not that long ago, and definitely certainly a step in a different direction. I think
mhm.
that's safe to say. I thought it was great. It was very, um, it felt more experimental. It felt darker. It felt like it almost had like this like tone to it in certain songs at least that was like reminiscent of like dark hip hop and trap music and like
Totally. Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that other than that. It's not like that. It just has that same kind of sonic setting. So I don't know.
Hmm.
Anyways, can you speak to that? Was that intentional? How did you make this album? And
Yeah.
what does that say about the future of your music?
Yeah. So I just put out it's called Girls Night. And if you look at the cover of the record, it's not as frightening as it sounds. It's just a bunch of deer like on a trail cam. But yeah, it's there's a like subgenre, and I hate to get into like nitpicky subgenres, but there's a subgenre called witch house. It's like house music for witches.
Is that
And
what this
so
falls into?
yeah. So there's a few artists that especially my wife, listens to quite a bit. There's a gentleman named Sidewalks and Skeletons that I think he's kind of like the quintessential. He's kind of the Tom Cruise of that scene. It's kind of like trap drums with maybe like all female choir, kind of operatic noise, and then I've always loved
Or
nasty, distorted, grungy sounds. And so it's a lot of really dirty sounding synths with kind of angelic vocals, and then maybe like a trap beat. It doesn't have to be a trap beat, but yeah, kind of that thing. And there's quite a bit of that on there. There's other stuff too. I mean, there's it's a I was kind of all over the place with that one, but I like the juices have been flowing lately, and I came out here one night and I made witch house type song, and I just thought, and it just kind of went from there. Then I found that picture. That's the cover, which I love. I think that's my favorite cover of mine. I don't know that it's like so super witty or anything like that. It's kind of a dumb photo. But for me, I just was like, it was so inspiring to see that cover and think of the title "Girls' Night." And so it's got a lot of female vocal samples and things like that. And I can't really speak to like the opinions of women about it, but I really wanted to make sort of a lady driven record, I guess. And it wasn't the entire intention, but once I got going, I was like, just keep looking for loops of women singing, royalty free, of course, always, and just see if you can sample them in there here and there.
Girls' Night, female driven album, and that's a good kind of lead into collaborating with people.
Mm.
What's your experience been like that with other artists? And if you had to pick at one or two, maybe artists that you're eager to potentially collaborate with, who would they be?
Yeah, I'm not the most collaborative. I would say I see, and it would probably be smart if I did. It's cool that when we reach across the aisle and we can share fan. I don't actually. I don't like to use the word fans because I'm such a small artist. But
You have fans.
collaboration. Thanks. Yeah, collaborations are cool for that, like networking purposes. And there's some guys out there I really like. I've done collaborations with Astral Tales. He's a really kind guy from the Canary Islands. Him and I probably once a year will get together and just shoot each other emails back and forth of parts we've written, and we'll see if anything comes of it. But there's two Heatwave songs, which I think is probably like my sort of seminal song. For whatever reason, it's got the most streams and it seemed to get the most attention. So he played guitar on that. He's just an absolutely awesome lead player. He thinks like me when it comes to music. It's very cool. Like there's a guy, Emilio Estevez. Yes, like the A word, Tevez, Emilio Estevez. He's just a synth nerd I met online. He's got a room just full of synthesizers, and sometimes I'll collaborate with him. Super friendly guy, super fun. And as far as people I'd like to collaborate with, I don't know. I have a couple of smaller, well, not smaller artists, but like smaller things in the work. I don't know if you've heard of Phaserland. Me and him have gone back and forth saying maybe we should do something someday. And there's a guy named Caspro, and we've done the same kind of dance. We've kind of just watching each other saying maybe someday we'll work together. So there should be some stuff in the works.
Guys
But like
I'm just
yeah,
picturing guys at a saloon, like looking at each other.
yeah, just like a producer saloon. We're like, yeah,
I'm
I
like,
heard you.
what do you think? You think we should?
Yeah,
Caspro's great, by the way. Really
heard you're
awesome.
handy with the Lindrum. Oh, sorry. Who'd you?
That's great. Yeah, sorry. If you could give me Desert Island, right? Last three albums, EPs, synthwave that you can listen to, plus your favorite, retro sci-fi horror movie soundtrack. If you can squeeze that in.
That's honestly that's an easy one. I don't know why, but the Midnight Nocturnal I think is a as close to perfect as we're gonna get. Also the Midnight Monsters because it's a completely different album and they made it during the pandemic and that just like I said that was a big moment in my life the pandemic and then Comtrue's looking at my vinyls Iteration he made a record called Iteration that I think is just it's just everything he does just maxed out. I love the Big Trouble in Little China soundtrack. It's actually scary for a movie that's kind of goofy. And then Halloween 3 Season of the Witch has just such a good soundtrack. So maybe it's just as high. I could probably think of more, but I'll Evangelist Blade Runner. I don't know.
You've been in this scene for a decade now. How have you seen it change in that, or almost that decade? How have you seen it change, and what do you hope the next step or the next evolution kind of looks like?
I wish I knew. I wish I was a little more like finger on the pulse about it. I mean, there was a like you said the first wave, which is cool that you would consider me part of the first wave. I definitely am not a pioneer. It was well established
You're like the
before
end of
I
the
got
first
here.
wave.
Yeah. I can agree with that. It's nice to hear someone else say it. I've seen a decade of it, and it had this steep incline, and then it feels like a bumpy but slow decline. I feel like the '80s in pop culture just were there. Steven Spielberg made an '80s movie, and Stranger Things, and I think people really it was captivating for a minute there, and then maybe it got a little oversaturated with other things of lesser quality, and that I think that extends to the music too. I think we all had sort of the same learning curve, so you're still hearing a lot of newer artists doing kind of like one of two of the major things, and I think at some point we stopped being inspired by music from the '80s and started being inspired by other synthwave artists. So it all became sort of this one congealed thing. So, and I think we can expand from that. And I never intentionally was trying to be different or trying to break any boundaries or anything like that. But I would hope that artists like me and others too. I'm not, I don't think everybody's just this like whitewashed, boring, simple formula. There's a ton of us out here doing just like seeing what else we can apply it to. So I think as far as the future goes, we'll probably end up rather than using the influences we came into synthwave with. There's like metal synthwave guys and pop music synthwave guys and things like that. Rather than turning that into synthwave, I think synthwave is going to turn kind of back into those things that got us started. So we'll start hearing less synthwave inspired '80s music and more, or not, like a synthwave inspired R&B and more R&B with like synthwave elements. I think it'll just get a little bit more hidden within like the greater genre, or not genre, like in the greater scheme of things itself. We'll still hear those Juno synths in certain songs, and we'll still hear '80s drum machines in certain songs. But I just don't think it'll be so '80s centric anymore. I think maybe people have had their fill of that. I mean, the public at large. I mean,
Yeah, I think yes, I think I would agree with that. And especially the first part of what you said, kind of just like describing what felt like kind of a plateauing, if you will, in the scene.
yeah,
For every artist, and there are artists that maybe, got more complacent than others and stuff like that. But I think that was a really apt way of describing it without like attacking one particular artist, because it was
oh, I'll attack a particular artist. Just give me a name.
well, I think there are specific artists I can think of that whose music um, the time for uh, the 80s dominance of this retro scene is starting to phase out. I still think it has a few years left. That's my opinion.
Hmm.
I still think we're at the very tail end of that. But
Yeah,
part of that is people are getting older, and the nostalgia is now starting to lean more towards my age group, which is the 90s nostalgia,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
early 2000s nostalgia. So we lean into that too. What we still play a bunch of 80s inspired stuff, and of course,
Hmm.
like listening to the 90s and growing up in the 90s were obviously heavily influenced by the 80s,
Hmm.
even though the 90s
Yeah.
sound distinctly different in many
I
ways.
think Depeche Mode did some of their best stuff in the '90s. So just to keep that in
Oh,
mind.
dude, the 90s were awesome. The music in the 90s was so great. So like I'm happy to kind of like evolve our live performance and show sound
Hmm.
more in
As
this
it should. I
direction.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it absolutely, the wheel of time moves on. I mean, even like swing dancing had a resurgence. I'm sure the '80s will be back in some form.
I kind of want to just tease out like the future for you a little bit, the future of Slumber, and I want to know, have you ever played live shows before? And if not, do you have any interest in doing that?
The cool thing about having eclectic music is that you get to say that you're eclectic, but the tough thing about eclectic music is how would I DJ that? Like I don't know that I could learn a new skill set. So anyways, long story short, I've thought about playing live. And if there was a really compelling reason for me to do it, because I'm not I'm a couple hours away from LA and a couple hours away from San Francisco, and I don't
Would
know.
you ever consider like a one-off album release party where at minimum you do like a very mild DJing of the music, like not necessarily a full-on, performance?
Yeah, no, I love that idea. That sounds absolutely fantastic. I would love to rent a cool space and put up a because who doesn't want to hear their own music on like a huge PA? That's why I go to shows to this very day. I don't get in the pit because I don't want to get hurt, but I just want to hear loud music. So I mean, yeah, I would absolutely maybe do a record release party for myself,
Yeah,
just in a super
something to
narcissistic
consider.
way. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
always celebrate me.
something to consider. And I'd say if that itch ever scratches, give it a shot because I think you'd look killer
Yeah,
on stage.
I
And
know. Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Thank you
um,
for that. That might be something to think about.
I wish I could write another 18 questions here and just keep going with
Mm,
you. I'm at the end. I think our SynthWorld listeners have a lot to chew on in the Slumber universe, and I want you to say or let them know where do they go to kind of finally reach the depths of slumber that are there
mm.
on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, Bandcamp is the place to be. I think for me, I Bandcamp is cool. I try to put stuff out on Bandcamp Friday just to whatever, and I usually put my stuff out for free because I have this whole philosophy about treating people like an audience and not like fans. I'm more like a guy in a park who's just trying to play my songs to you. So I try not to charge. Some of my stuff I'll get like really really broke sometimes and be like I got to start asking for money. But for the most part, all
Hmm.
my stuff is free on Bandcamp 99% of the time. And I'm not super active on Instagram, but that's the best way to like get a hold of me. Like, I mean, I'll post in my stories and stuff, but I really don't. I'm just not super active on social media. So I would say the two. I mean, check it out on Spotify. That's usually everybody's kind of like easiest thing. And I'd love to get those streams up. I would absolutely love to just get a wider audience. So Spotify, I'm easy to find. Don't forget the V and Slumber. Bandcamp is great. It's much more personal. And Instagram, if you actually just want to like say what's up, I will probably reply.
Well, thanks again. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And until next time, man, stay retro.